Happy New Year, guys. We are, 4 days into the new year as of this recording, and if you have been anywhere near a news channel or a news source of any kind, you know we have started off with a bang. But we're going to talk about that on Wednesday, because today we're going to stay in our lane for what I have decided to talk about on Mondays, and that is going to church. Actually, it's about anything to do with the faith, but for now, I want to start off with a good, solid, quite a few videos talking about going to church, why you should go to church, and how to find a church, and that's what we're getting into today. If you remember last week, I gave an overview of kind of the method that I used when my wife and I recently just had to go through the process ourselves, and we didn't just find a new church, we changed what tradition we were entirely. So we began as Baptists, which is kind of how I grew up, and was kind of what she was familiar with too. She wasn't really a consistent churchgoer and actually was a non-believer when I first met her. But, by the grace of God, we're both here today. We're both together, and we are definitely Christians now. And we are happily Lutherans, and we've joined our church since and have been regularly attending over this past year. And I want that for you guys as well. I would love for you guys to be Lutheran, but more than just being Lutheran, I care about you guys becoming a Christian, whatever the stripe is. So today we're going to have a broader view, and we're going to discuss the very first step. So it was about a 10-step process, but step one is determine whether or not you have a need to look for a new church. So, before we get into that, I'm losing my train of thought, because I was just laughing at myself, because I shoot most of my videos from this place near where I live. It's kind of an empty parking lot on the weekends, because it's kind of like an educational center, an adult education center, and it's usually completely vacant. And I live in an apartment right now without really any space set aside to do this sort of thing. And I also have a baby son at home. And I know some of you guys would love to see adorable little guy, but I'm not the most comfortable sharing that online. And I also want your poor ears to not have to sit here and listen to all of the fun little noises he likes to make. So I was just driving around. I'm extremely pale, in case you couldn't tell, and the sun is still at an angle where if I was facing the first place I parked, it was beaming right through my windshield, right onto my face, and I had to move and rotate my truck a couple of times. So, anyways, way sidetracked there. One day, if you hang with me and keep following me, keep supporting me, I will get some kind of actual studio set up one day. I would love to be able to just do this, spend more time and effort doing this and talking about the things that I care about and hopefully are of some value to you. So with that in mind, let's get to the topic today. So step one of this church search process. And remember, take this, this doesn't have to be, this is nothing official pulled from anywhere. This is just Chase's personal experience and kind of the method I tried to put down on paper to follow some kind of system to actually get me from A to B. So step one of that is you need to determine whether or not you have an actual need to even begin looking for a church. So we'll go through a couple of things real quick here. And that is, if you are not a part of a church, then the answer is easy. You need to go out and start looking for a church. So welcome to the process. If you are kind of associated to a church, you've kind of been off and on going, not really, or you're associated with a church that you haven't really attended in a little while, well, it's time to go back, because this whole process should not be taken lightly. Even if it's not necessarily your first choice, or you're not sure if you're going to stay there, you need to be under good instruction. You need to be under the accountability system, the community that a church provides, a local church provides, and no solo Christians around here. So if you want to see more of my discussion on that, I'm going to link a couple of my own videos down in the description. where I gave my reasons on why I think someone needs to go to church, and they can't just do the Christian walk on their own. But if you've kind of been a part of a church and not been committed, it's time to get committed, because if you can't create the habit at the church you're going to now, how can someone trust you to commit to a new church? So before you even begin considering the things that you believe, you need to build that habit. So I understand it's a little different if you were not at any point, if you're, maybe you're a brand new Christian, or you've never gone to church before. That's a little different. But if you have, and you've been a part of one, you need to get back there. And then the third starting point is you've been attending regularly, but something is beginning to feel off. Something about, maybe it's the sermons. You don't know if you really agree with everything that the pastor says, and this shouldn't just be based on your feelings. Okay. I want to stress, I am not encouraging looking for a new church as the first course of action. I think you really need to dig deep and do some soul searching. And we're going to go over some example reasons. So I've got kind of a couple different groups of what are more valid and what's invalid, but at least from what I would consider. But what you do need to do is you really need to be in your Bible, first of all. And then you need to really, ideally, you need to be probably discussing and seeking counsel, if not from your pastor, then from probably one of the elders in your church, to really give them a chance to answer some questions that you have. See what it is that is bothering you, run it by them. I'm sure most churches, they would love to discuss. And they would probably do a great job of, even if you ultimately disagree in the end, they would probably really appreciate the chance to at least talk with you and try to talk through it. And that's going to be another key theme through this whole process is don't scorn the place that you're leaving. Because ultimately it may end up being the right place to stay. And that's going to be real bad if you have been all gung-ho, talking crap on your previous church or what you thought was going to be your previous church. And now you're like, well, actually, I decided I need to stay, and sorry about that, guys. And also, it's just not the right thing to do. You shouldn't go, just because you feel called to switch denominations or whatever, doesn't mean you should be disparaging where you came from. And, I have to be careful that I don't do that as well. I'm definitely not innocent there, as I've moved away from certain beliefs and towards others. But because I do believe the church that I did leave was a good Bible preaching church, some of the points that we're going to get into later, I couldn't in good conscience stick around. But yeah, and that's going to be my main focus today is I'm going to assume that you are somebody that you've been going to church, but you've noticed there's something that's bothering you. So before we get into the reasons that I think are good and bad reasons to begin looking for a church, we're going to take a quick note to talk about the types of churches. And this will get its own video, if not more than one video, another day. But I'm just going to want to go down a quick list of churches that I think are, if you are in one of these churches, you should definitely, I would cease attending that church entirely, immediately, as difficult as that may be. And then other churches that I think you definitely need to continue to attend until you know for sure that you need to take your search elsewhere or move into your later phases of the search. So churches that you're probably fine. We'll start with the good ones first. If you are anything of, and I apologize, guys, this is completely unedited. I would be putting things on the screen. It will come in time. But for now, just going to be me reading off my notes. So if you are going to a church that belongs to any of the following traditions or denominations, then you should probably stick where you're at while you kind of think and study and research this whole process. And that is a Presbyterian church, a Lutheran church. If you're Anglican, Baptist, Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Methodist, Mennonite, Nazarene, or a Holiness Church, I'm not entirely clear what the differences are there. Or you're some type of just non-denominational or just generally an evangelical churchgoer. There's probably more than that. That's not an absolutely exhaustive list, but that's most of the big ones. That's the vast majority of them. So if you are attending any of those churches, keep going, man. Keep going and seek counsel. Ask your questions, because you may end up finding the answers that you're looking for and staying right where you're at. And you know what? Good for you. That is a valid, perfectly acceptable outcome. But if not, then that's what we're going to discuss next. But if you are going to any of these following churches, and we will discuss why I think they are not only not good churches, I don't believe they should be considered Christian at all. And I am definitely not the only one that believes that. This is not just my opinion. There are many, many Christians that believe these very same things. So if you are a Jehovah's Witness, which I know is almost certainly not a chance you're watching this video right now, because as I understand it, have a pretty tight control on what you're allowed to look at online. If you go to a Oneness Pentecostal church, you need to get out of there. They teach a heretical view of the Trinity. If you go to a Unitarian or Universalist church, maybe it's the same thing. I haven't really done a deep dive. If you are a part of Christian Science, if you are a part of the World Mission Society Church of God, I myself have had a couple interesting encounters with these guys out in the wild. I call them the Mother God cult, because that is exactly what they are, and we'll discuss that in another day. Or if you go to a New Apostolic Reformation church, or, and this last one, please don't take this wrong, but if you go to a Mormon church, you also need to probably cut that off sooner than later. And that comes from someone who has a lot of Mormon family members. If you're Mormon watching this, listen, man, I love you. I don't hate you. I don't have this like burning hatred or this beef with Mormons. I just think we have some significant theological differences. And it's not like, oh, I go to a Lutheran church, you go to a Baptist church, we're still buddies. I think there are some very core things that are changed in Mormon theology that would be mostly the same in all the other Christian churches. We will talk about that another day. It's not the focus of this video. But if you're in any of those churches, get out of town, man. You gotta start the search. So what are those reasons? Well, I got 3 categories. We have valid reasons, invalid reasons, and some conditional reasons where it really depends on the specifics. So, and again, these are by no means exhaustive lists. These are just a couple of the big ones that I could think of off the top of my head. And if I can find some scriptures to kind of go with some of this, there are a couple of these things, some stuff was popping in my mind, but I needed to get out and make this video, so I didn't have time to go searching through and reading through. So I will try to put those in the description when I have a little bit more time. But starting with the valid reasons. So reason number 1, you are going to a heretical church. I'm not going to waste much more time on this. We have already discussed what some of those churches are. And the point is because they are going to give you not just bad doctrine and lead you astray, you're going to find yourself condemned to hell if you are part of these churches in following what they believe. And I don't want that for you. I know if you're one of those churches, you're probably the exact inverse of me right now. You're probably thinking, well, man, you're the one that's misguided. I don't want you to go to hell. I get it, man. So let's discuss it in the future, okay? Or leave your thoughts in the comments below here. But we can discuss that in future videos. Valid reason number 2, you have experienced some sort of abuse. As much as it breaks my heart to say, we're still human, man. Just because we are a part of Christ's church does not mean that we are immune from sin or misbehavior, and some people really probably should not be. And most of this is focusing on kind of how leadership is and how they're handling things. But if anyone at your church is physically abusing you, or God forbid, sexually abusing you or taking advantage of you in those ways, I hesitate to, I think, mental abuse also you could throw in there, but I have some reservations on that. We'll get into that in the invalid reasons. But if you have been genuinely abused at any time, do not be afraid to, first of all, report to someone who you may actually trust in your church, whether that's just another churchgoer or someone who is in leadership position. But you may need to get out of there entirely and just cut all ties, and you may even need to get authorities involved. And please, especially if it is something as horrible as sexual abuse, please get the authorities involved. I hate, this is something I'm very passionate about, is I hate how much the sexual abuse in particular just mars the gospel, mars the mission of the church. And I don't say that from a place of I want to hide it and smother it. I say that from a place of I wish we could punish people that commit these things far more severely and far more widespread than we do. But again, that's a conversation for another day. But please seek the help that you need. Please report it. Don't keep it to yourself. And if nothing else, get out of there. I promise you there are better churches. And reason number 3 under the valid reasons is bad leadership, which kind of applies to what I just talked about, but I'm also thinking of pastors just being unqualified, or not even just the pastor, perhaps elders or other, leader roles within the church. I will reference a couple scriptures in the description for this one, because the Bible gives some very specific qualifications for pastors. And this is not to be taken lightly. We have far too many unqualified pastors in the United States, and there probably needs to be a culling. Some things that should be red flags, and again, red flags is going to be its own discussion topic another day, but just some quick examples. If your pastor is teaching any form of the prosperity gospel, you need to run. If your pastor is really into social justice, you probably need to run. If your pastor is irreverent, is doing things on stage or on in the sanctuary, I'm thinking of like the crazy example. Basically follow the Protestia account and look at the things that they report pastors is doing. But I've seen dudes like pouring, crap all over the bread and the wine for communion. I've seen people kicking Bibles for football Sundays, all kinds of crazy stuff. If that is a church you go to, you need to get out of there. If they affirm LGBT lifestyles, or if the pastor is just extremely hateful. And hatred of sin is one thing, but you need to be very careful with your hatred of people. Your pastor especially should not be casting that hatred on people. It's okay to hate the sin, but when you're a pastor, you're in charge. You are the example, first of all, and then you also have to guide others. And God will hold you to a higher degree of responsibility for how you guide the people under your care. So that's the valid reasons. If those things are happening in your church or happening to you, then I would definitely seek another church. Invalid reasons, being held accountable for sin. This is the old church hurt thing, and that's not to discount some legitimate instances of church hurt, but in the United States especially, we seem to be in this mindset, and I've even had to correct myself on this, where we're fine with going to a church, even going to church every Sunday and kind of checking the box, but we don't like when they start to pry into our lives. We don't like when our pastor or a Christian brother or sister is starting to kind of point things out like, hey man, notice you drink a lot. You realize you're not really supposed to be doing that, right? You're not supposed to be a drunkard. I noticed you live with your girlfriend. What's that about, man? That's directly called out. Sexual immorality is called out time and time again. And if that upsets you and you're calling yourself a Christian, then I'm sorry, my friend, you need to do some soul searching. You need to correct yourself, because church discipline is a very valid function of the church. And we as Americans, we don't like that. We are individualistic, and I love individualism to a point. But we are individualistic to a fault. We want people to mind their own business and stay out of our personal business and just shake our hands and smile at us while we're there at church on Sunday. No, the church is there to hold you accountable. You must be called to repent of sin. And they can't do that if they're not getting in your business. So there is an inappropriate way to do that, but in general, if you're just upset because you're being told to stop sinning, that's on you, man. Invalid reason number 2, poor demographics. I'm not going to waste my breath. You shouldn't be obsessing about race. I'm not going to discuss, things of like crime stats or, racial tension in the United States. This isn't the place for that discussion. But you should not be bothered by people that look different than you in your church. If you do, then again, you need to examine yourself. But something that I think is more kind of an understandable struggle is if you are going to a church, or if you've been part of a church where, let's say most of the congregation is a little older and you just don't feel like there's a lot of people you can really relate to there. I don't think that's a great reason to leave. I know it's hard, but we all have our crosses to bear, and churches need youngsters too. If all the youngsters are running away to another, young hip church, then that old church is just going to die out, and that's not right. I think that's very poor justification to leave. And so you probably need to plan it right where you're at, and you probably need to see if there's something you can do to help, start inviting some other people more close to your age. I know, easier said than done, but this may be a particular unique challenge that God has set aside for you to help that church survive and continue on into the next, couple of decades. And invalid reason number 3, so there's 3 reasons to each of these here, is disagreement on minor doctrines. So the next video we're going to discuss is theological triage. So I won't waste a lot of time here, but some examples of some doctrines that I don't think really justify you kicking rocks are a difference between you and maybe the pastor on things like creationism, your particular flavor of eschatology, details about angels or heaven or spirits, and even worship style. That's not to say those aren't important, and there may be instances where they do kind of play at least a little role in helping you determine where to go. But in and of themselves, I don't think worship style maybe a little bit more, and I can understand where eschatology might affect kind of the larger attitude of the church, but in general, Christians should be able to disagree and still commune together on most of those issues and more. So now we get into the conditional reasons, and number 1 is logistics. So, the most obvious example being if you have recently moved. So if you've moved to a whole new city, a whole new place, yeah, it's just a necessity. You're going to have to find a new place to go to church. But let's say you just moved across town, which is kind of my wife and I's situation. And it may be better for you to, out of practical reasons, not just, the time it takes to travel or how much extra you're going to spend in gas, but in just your consistent habit of going to church, it may be worthwhile going to church that's closer to you, even if it's different than what you have been a part of for some time. And this could go either way. This is a very 50-50 one, because I could also see reasons where if you're not in a town that's that big, so my wife and I go to church on the other side of town from where we're at currently, but it's because we love the place that we're going. To us, it's worth that extra trip. And that's not to say I'm better than anybody, because there are certainly days where it's hard and I have to resist that urge to just, I can just stay home. No, you got to get out the door. But maybe you've been there a long time, you've built relationships, and you know what? You're just on the other side of town, you haven't left the state. So it might be worth, putting in that little extra effort to keep that going. Goes either way on that one. Number 2, spiritual stagnation. And this one is, I feel like I'm going to leave a little vague. I just want you to know that this is ultimately not about us. Remember, Christ is the central character in the faith, not ourselves. Yes, we need a place that is going to disciple us and teach us and hold us accountable and help us to grow as Christians and give us places and opportunities to serve. But ultimately, it's about Christ. So if you are just bored and you want to leave because you're bored, it's probably not a good reason, man. It's probably a pretty weak reason. I want you to look at yourself. What are you doing? Are you coming to church with the right attitude, ready to listen, ready to pay attention, take some notes? Are you studying on your own? Are you reading, or are you just kind of poo-pooing, checking the box on Sunday, popping in, and just kind of drifting off and singing the songs, clapping your hands, and then you go home and you live your own life the rest of the week? If that is your answer, you need to stay right where you're at. Reason number 3, and is going to be my main focus from here on out, is changing convictions. And this is where, let me just read. These are doctrines that shape the life of the church and distinguish entire traditions. If, upon scriptural study, you notice a significant shift that cannot be reconciled with either further study, digging deeper, or with counsel with trusted church leaders, it may be time to start searching. And this was also a major factor for me. I was away from church for a long time, and when I came back and went to what was familiar and started diving into the Word again, I noticed my beliefs had changed, and I was, listening to some people on the internet that I thought they were making some good points, and that ultimately led to why my wife and I, discussed these things with my wife, She understood and agreed. So that's why we ultimately made a switch from one tradition to the other. But that is not to be taken lightly. And we will get into more. A single example I'll give of something kind of at this caliber is sacraments or ordinances and what your specific beliefs are on that, because that issue splits entire churches from another. Not just entire churches, but entire traditions. So, but we're going to get into that more with the next video, discussing step 2, which is theological triage. And I appreciate you guys for sticking with me. This has gone on yet again longer than I meant to, but hey, that's about par for the course. I keep telling myself I'm going to get these videos shorter, and I just get on and I yap, and I can't stop myself. So I guess my channel name is just an ironic channel name, but who knows? Maybe I'll get better at making my point more concisely in the future. But thank you guys very much for hanging in here. What do you think of the reasons? Do you think what other reasons could you think of, and why would you think one might be more valid than the other to leave or to stay in a church? I would love to hear your guys' opinions on things. I know I definitely don't have everything right, so if I'm way off base, by all means, let me know. And other than that, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.